Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today. So the digital and tech giants began with cute logos and hip slogans, but they're rapidly morphing into a 21st century version of Fritz Lang's Metropolis, growing into the largest corporations the world has ever seen. Apple alone is worth more than the GDP of 90% of the countries in the world. Many now see these companies as malevolent monopolies with massive, largely untaxed profits and manipulate our behaviour for their own benefit. Some even claim that the epidemic of mental ill health can be laid at their door. If we want to escape their vision of the future, can they be stopped? Does their power and influence signal the loss of control of national governments to global corporations? Or is it still possible for governments to fight back? And if so, how? With me to discuss this is this wonderful panel that we have. To my far left, we have Shoshana Zuboff, author of the incredible book, Surveillance Capitalism, about which more later and in the bookshop. We have Bim Afolami, who is a member of Parliament. We have the author, Joanna Kavenna, whose outstanding novel, Zed, I cannot recommend enough. I laughed and was horrified the entire way through. And finally, last but not least at all, Angela Eagle, to my right, who's also a member of Parliament. So the first part is what should worry us most about the digital and tech giants' vision of the future? Shoshana, you've literally written the book, so we'll start with you.
I would like to turn this question to you in a certain way. What are the concerns? What are the feelings? What are the issues that brought you here this morning instead of going to Brighton? And if you could just think about that for a moment and shout out one word that represents why you're here. What is the key concern? Love to hear that. And then I'll make a very quick response and we'll stay within the 3 minutes. Tell me. What? Manipulation. Transparency. Climate emergency. What was that? Democracy. Thank you. Okay, so I didn't bring this folder with me, but here's the thing. This book was published in January, and as you can imagine, I've been going around to a lot of countries and cities and talking to wonderful groups of people like you. And I ask this question everywhere I go. And here's what's happening. Every group of people that I visit with are producing the same list of words: autonomy, manipulation, fear, anxiety, democracy, resistance, literally everything that you've said today. I've heard all around the world. This is why I think it's so important. What do they call us? Well done. You get the gold star. They call us users. An anonymous, unwashed, undifferentiated, global population of users. But what your concerns reveal is that we are beginning to not only feel, but articulate our shared social, political, economic, and indeed psychological interests. We are no longer merely users. We are starting to get the fact that we are actually used and beginning to think about what's wrong with that. And that is going to lead to the sea change in public opinion that will change our politics and will change our future. That's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm devoted to. And that's why I'm here today and not at the beach. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to Bim, over to you. What should worry us most about the digital and tech giants' vision of the future?
Well, thank you very much for being here. So my sense of this is, to some degree, similar, but slightly different. What should worry us most is that they have an entirely global reach, a global understanding, a mass view of how they treat every single one of us users. But we do not have, not just us in the United Kingdom, but in different countries in the world, we do not have any sort of governance mechanism that matches that. So there is a complete mismatch between the ability of global tech giants to operate, which is on a global basis, and our ability to influence that, which is because we all operate in increasingly national spheres. And I mean increasingly national because it is obvious to most people that the world is going through what you might see as sort of decoupling from globalization in political terms, a retrenchment in most countries in the West, and the United States being one very good example of that, and the United Kingdom with Brexit being another one. And what that means is we increasingly lack the ability to govern these global actors who are themselves, through the use of technology, processing data, as you were talking about, they are increasingly able to operate globally, and yet we are decreasingly able to influence that. And that is where the fear, the anxiety comes from, because people can sense, people can smell that lack of agency. And when they say to their representatives, whether they be local MPs all the way up to the Prime Minister or the government, they also know that these people can't do anything about it either. And that, I think, is the core of our problem that we should explore. Thank you.
Joanna.
So yes, I really agree with what I've heard. The surveillance is huge. We should be terrified. Shoshana's book's hugely important. We're forced, as Edward Snowden said, to live naked before power. And there's also a crisis of democracy that comes from that, which is that, as he's also pointed out, if you force a population to whom surveillance is anathema to live under surveillance, you destroy democracy. You're forcing everyone to do something they hate, and you fracture your society. And I think also something that's a kind of part of this and also goes beyond is there's a massive change that's occurred in 20 years. Almost everyone in this room, if you're over 20, you've lived through a revolution, the digital era. And that changes the whole dimension of information and power. It's a complete transformation. There's a weird interview, I don't know if any of you saw it, 1999. David Bowie is interviewed by Jeremy Paxman. Odd idea, you may remember. And he's trying to tell Paxman about the revolutionary import of the internet. And at one point he says it's an alien life form. Jeremy Paxman raises a quizzical eyebrow. But what he meant was it completely adjusts society, and he says it's going to cause utter disruption. And he talks about it's the realization of Duchamp's image of the art, the artwork and the audience. That it used to be you had the great artist, the authority, declaiming to the audience, and the audience is silent. And that's the transaction. It's on broadcast mode. Now the meaning of the work is in the interaction between the audience and the work of art. There's a whole grey area. And the tech companies and the governments are still in this kind of industrial mode where you broadcast, you lie, you propagandize, you control. That's a total disconnect that's occurring. And yet society has fractured into all these communities that talk amongst themselves, that talk back. It's a complete transition. And I think that tension and the lack of a vision, instead, really what happens is more control, more autocracy, more watching, more surveillance. That's how the reaction seems to occur at the moment. And that has to change because otherwise you fracture the whole thing. And, the mirror has fractured that used to reflect back that broadcast mode. And the pieces are there and you can't, keep talking in the same way. So I think that too, and they will get regulated in a way, they should be regulated, they will be regulated, but that change is the massive, massive transformation, I think.
Thank you. And Angela.
Thanks very much. Well, I'd like to say that size does matter. The 5 largest tech companies are collectively worth more than the entire economy in the UK. Only 4 national economies are larger than the combined tech giants, and that is the US, China, Japan, and Germany. And I think unchecked, these malevolent monopolies are likely to grow even more dominant and control more of our existence, our experience, and our lives.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below, or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.